good.
Okay. So this was my first year at Camp Osceola.
You have to pull it together.
My first year at Camp Osceola, I was like 11, almost 12. And they had like military surplus mattresses on these metal frame beds with metal springs. And you put your sleeping bag on top of the mattress. And I don't think I even had a pillow. I think I just rolled up a bunch of clothes and used that as a pillow. So I'm in my sleeping bag. And again, it's like a metal bed frame. And I didn't sleep at all until we went on the backpack trip because we were sleeping on the ground. But every time I moved my foot, the spring squeaked. So every time I tried to adjust my posture in the bed and get comfortable, there's this squeak, from these rusty steel spring beds. Anyway, it wasn't a good experience, but the hot chocolate in the morning was really good. And that's all I have to say about that. At Y Camp every summer, the ages of 12, 13, 14, and then I became an assistant leader at 15 and 16, those 2 summers. But those 3 summers, we would go on a 4-day backpack trip into the San Gorgonio Wilderness. And the culmination was climbing Mount San Gorgonio, which was the highest point, still is the highest point, obviously, in Southern California. It was like 12,500 feet or something akin to that. So we'd hike up that, but we would leave our packs down at Dollar Lake, which was a campground. And Dollar Lake was incredibly cold because the mountain it sloped down, and the wind would come down the mountain and then across the lake, a spring-fed lake, so it was always cold, spring-fed lake, and then onto the kind of the flat adjacent to the lake where we'd cook and sleep. Anyway, the first year, I was 12, the first year I slept with all my clothes on, that I hiked all day in, and a heavy jacket. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning or so. I was so cold. And I had a space blanket, and I did what you aren't supposed to do with a space blanket. And so I was so cold, even sleeping with all my clothes on. Wrapped myself with the reflective side in, which you're not supposed to do. And I woke up about, 15, 20 minutes later, just sweating profusely, because it's reflecting all my 98.6 body heat. And so now I'm sweating. It's cold, and I'm making things worse because I'm covered with sweat, perspiration. So I'm wet and cold. So it was a very, very long night. So I never did that again. But in subsequent years, it was always just so cold. I just sleep in my clothes, which was essentially a pair of Levi's and a sweatshirt or a jacket, and that was that. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It is Nolan's 6-month birthday today. And I can't remember being 6 months. or what happened, but I do know because of history and photographs and my parents telling me that at that age we were living in a bungalow apartment, single story, in Hyde Park, on Hyde Park Boulevard in Inglewood, California. Now, for all I know, those probably don't even exist anymore because of the expansion of LA International Airport in that area. So there was a lot of displacement because of the expansion of the airport. Well after I was born. But I do remember photographs of being very young, in a stroller, being pushed around a real place called Hyde Park that had a duck pond, and I think there's an old photograph. There's an old photograph of me being nipped by a swan next to the pond as my mom was pushing me in the stroller. Yeah, it's a good story. Being nipped by the swan is not a good thing. So that's where I was when I was 6 months. Yes, I know. That's right. So it's a joyous day. We had a delicious meal tonight of grilled chicken and some sweet potato and some red potato and a melange of squash and onions and sauteed. And Chris and I split a Dos Equis. What was the
Amber.
name? Amber. It was a good mellow beer. It was really good. So Nolan was about ready to go to sleep, but you couldn't tell by looking at him. He's cuddling with Pooh Bear, aren't you? Yeah, he is. He's part of this video. Anyway, good night, everybody. Okay, so Bazooka is up here in Young with us, with Chris and Sarah and Nolan, and reminded of Fogo, the dog that was part of a litter that Bill and Janet, our friends, introduced us. Their dogs, their labs, Bucky and Coco, had a litter of, I think, 7 puppies. And Anne, before she even met me, was invited down by Janet, and it coincided with her parents coming through Casa Grande with the RV on their way to their annual campground host assignment in Glacier National Park, which they did for about 13, 14 years. And so they were going to stop, and Anne decided, well, she'd come down and visit them, see them, and also consider getting one of the puppies. Well, she was living in an apartment, and it was impractical for her to have an apartment up in Berkeley and all of that. And so I ended up getting one of the puppies. It was a yellow lab, a female, and I kind of did some research on Newfoundland and Labrador and geography of the area, and I looked at a map, and here was this small island off the coast of Labrador called Fogo Island. I said, well, that's a good name for a dog. So Fogo became the dog, and kept me up at night, whimpering, because it was still missing its mom and its litter mates. And so I was already working a lot of hours and didn't get a lot of sleep during those whimpering season for her. And I'd go home for lunch every day to check on her, let her out, go to the bathroom, bring her back in, make sure she had food and water for the afternoon. Because I usually didn't get home until 6:30 or 7, in the evening. And so eventually Fogo was big enough for me to put on a leash and walk around the block. And later I was told by our neighbor Kurt Christie, who would watch me walk the dog around the block. And he and his wife sat on the front porch, and as I walked by, he said, you know, we got to pray for that guy. He is so lost. Now, how they discerned lostness just by watching me walk the dog by, I have no idea, but they were 100% right and prayed for me and interceded in that regard. And the Lord heard the intercession, and several years later chose to convert me and brought me to repentance and faith in the Lord. But one of my big memories of Fogo was after we got married, and then Chase was born 9 months later. We moved into the Rose Lane house. So Chase was like a year old, and he would go to the screen door and call out for Fogo to come in the house. So she was in the backyard. And he'd go to the screen door and he'd say, Bobo, Bobo. And it was a pretty cute thing. So who knows what nickname Nolan's going to have for Bazooka. Some kind of short version of Bazooka, as only a 1-year-old can say it. So that's it. We're still filming. When Fogo was still a puppy, I went for a walk with her one evening, and I found myself walking around a big block, probably between, I think it went 20th Street to Missouri and then over to 16th Street on the south side of the street. So I was facing oncoming traffic on Missouri. So I'm walking west on Missouri. And as I'm walking Fogo, I'm not paying attention, and I'm watching the traffic, and I end up tripping over a sprinkler head that was adjacent to the sidewalk. It was popped up, and I tripped over that, and I start stumbling, and my feet are stamping. I'm trying to catch my balance, and of course Fogo's on the leash. She thinks it's play and somebody's chasing her. Meanwhile, I'm holding on because there's oncoming traffic, eastbound traffic on Missouri, going 35, 40 miles an hour. Anyway, I end up holding on as she's pulling, and I end up falling flat on my face, still holding the leash firmly. And I'm holding on firmly, and I'm afraid to get up because I have no idea what damage I did to my body. I don't know if I broke something or whatever, but I was, needless to say, nothing was broken. I was just sore for a number of days. But I saved Fogo from running out into traffic onto Missouri, into oncoming traffic, sacrificing my body in the process. So that's that.